For many years, the Bible captivated the interest of Ron Wyatt, and he had it in his heart to show people that the Bible is true, that the miracles really happened, and that there is a God who we have to have a relationship with. But his work was to meet great resistance from both fellow Christians as well as scientists who don't want to believe or relate to the living God. Among the many discoveries he made was Noah's Ark, where he was held captive by PKK terrorists in eastern Turkey. And the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah that God destroyed with fire and brimstone.
For the roof of the lower floor and for the floor of the upper floor.
He risked his own life and was imprisoned for 1 month in Saudi Arabia because he wanted to reveal to the world that at the real Mount Sinai there was archaeological evidence of the Israelites. He also showed where the Red Sea crossing took place and Pharaoh's army drowned, and the several evidences under the sea that prove the story was true. He showed the possible place for the Israelite camp in Kadesh Barnea, where Moses struck the rock and the water gushed out. Here, it was obvious that water had once come pouring out of the stone foundation and drained down into the valley, yet nowhere in this vicinity is there any water supply. Most of those who knew Ron thought that what made the biggest impression on people was his genuine care for others and his humility. Almost 30 years ago, Ron Wyatt was walking over there between this wall and the Golgotha Escarpment with an employee from the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Suddenly, he raised his hand near to Golgotha Escarpment and he said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto and the Ark of the Covenant is in there." Both of them were very surprised by this statement, and Ron received verbal permission to dig there. Ron, who had his regular work beside his archaeological research, travelled home to decide as to whether or not to accept this task. Was the Ark of the Covenant really hidden there? And why, after so many years, did God want to unearth it again? Several thousands of years ago, Abraham came to this country. He was promised by the God of heaven that his descendants would have permission to live here. Abraham was chosen to keep the truth pure, at a time when myths about God were deeply embedded in Mesopotamia. Several hundred years had passed since the flood, an event that was well known by the kings in Mesopotamia. Cuneiform tablets like this from the British Museum tell of the Great Flood. The Mesopotamian kings claimed they were chosen and inaugurated by the highest God, and their kingship could be traced way back to before the flood. It is found in the Sumerian list of kings. Few would challenge the kings' claims. Their presentation of religion was seen as common knowledge. History tells us that Mesopotamia spread their teaching about God to the entire Middle East, Asia, and Europe through their trade. But what they claimed was a lie. God had not chosen them, but had chosen a man who lived in their midst. His name was Abraham. On God's command, Abraham travelled from Mesopotamia to Canaan, which today is Israel. God promised him that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, and in his seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. The Saviour that God had promised through Adam and Eve, Messiah, will be born from Abraham's seed. Abraham was given the task of guarding the truth. His descendants were to protect the truth right up to the coming of the Messiah and confirm the truth to the whole world. God honoured Abraham because Abraham honoured God first. God himself said, "Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my commandments, statutes, and judgments." Many of the commandments of God had also been kept in Mesopotamia, but they were selective of which laws they kept. That can be seen on the law of Hammurabi and the Cheyenne collections. Abraham kept all of God's commandments. The commandments that the others around him disregarded were those commandments that specified the true worship of God, the first 4 commandments in the 10 Commandment law. These commandments the king of Babylon threw out. I'm sure you know the history. The descendants of Abraham ended up in Egypt, where they were suppressed by Pharaoh after they grew in number. There, they were forced to break the Sabbath commandment that was given at creation and that Abraham kept. What Abraham taught them was now mixed with Egyptian teachings, and the truth that they were chosen to protect was now darkened. With a mighty hand, God delivered them out of Egypt by his servant Moses, to save the very people who would prepare the way for Messiah through their lives and teachings. God even parted the Red Sea for them so they could safely pass through, and safely on the other side they were led to Mount Sinai. During the Israelites' captivity in Egypt, they mixed a great deal of paganism with the truth of God. It was therefore necessary and important for God to teach them his truth and his commandments all over again. So Moses climbed the mountain and received 2 tables of stone, upon which God had written his 10 commandments with his own finger. This is the only thing we have on earth that God has written with his own finger. The only document from the Creator himself. These 10 words were called the testimony, as it was God's testimony to the world. Beside the 10 Commandments, there was another covenant they entered into. And this covenant says if they were loyal to God, then he will choose them over the other nations. They also received civil laws to maintain law and order. And it's important to separate the commandments from the civil laws. The 10 Commandments is a universal law. Moses was directed to build a sanctuary. Everything that he was to build, he would build according to the design of the temple he was shown in heaven. The 10 Commandments, or the testimony of God as it was called, was put into the ark.